Hello everyone! Before the War Within Madness, I figured it'd be a good idea to catch up on some of the books that have been released and I haven't covered quite yet. Today we're going to be talking about the Dragonflight Codex and some of the juicier lore bits within. But first, a mini review. The book sells for around $30 my side of the world, with a beautiful hardcover that really pops. I don't know if I'm going to be able to show it properly in this video, but the cover is like 3D-ish. You can feel the edges. Now the pages are filled with bits of information and then big old artworks. I've recognized a fair few of them from other sources, so I don't know if any new artwork is in here. I don't know every Warcraft art in existence, but a fair few of them I recognize from elsewhere. The information itself, as the title implies, it's a Dragonflight Codex. Any lover of dragons out there, you will devour this book, as it covers pretty much all that we know about them, gathering knowledge in one place, even some of the more obscure topics like fairy dragons or plague dragons, elemental dragons, primal dragons, and of course the known dragon aspects and their flights. They're all here collected in this book. With that in mind, I would have loved to recommend this book to anyone, especially lovers of dragons, but at this point in time, I can't, because the book, it has information that's flat out wrong, so hopefully they'll do a new edition that fixes some of the problems that it's got right now. What am I talking about? Well, one major example that popped out and made me double check some of the information that's in this book. It should have been one that's fairly obvious. If I would ask you the question, can dragons have babies? Can they reproduce? I don't think anyone has a hard time giving an answer, considering what we've seen on the Dragon Isles. Considering that part of the expansion's content was literally about a whelp daycare, yet the book still says that Thro and the mortal champions of Azeroth, the Dragonflights, brought an end to the aspect of death, even though their victory came at the grave cost of both their Titan Giver powers and their ability to produce future offspring. And then is repeated on the next page. Without the ability to produce eggs, the age of dragons and their guardianship over Azeroth may eventually end. Yet despite this grim reality, the Dragon Queen once again proved the strength of her enduring pledge by lending her strength at the Chamber of Heart. For those not in the know, once upon a time, they made the decision to indeed take away the dragon's reproduction. At the end of the Cataclysm, they figured, let's close the book on dragons. Not only give out their powers, but also their ability to reproduce. The true ending of Dragons of Warcraft and the dawn of the Age of Mortals. What happened after the Cataclysm is that, they got fan feedback. Interviews took place. Developers were asked, why are the dragons going to die out? And turns out that they never wanted to close the door on the story of dragons, at least not that hard. It was going to take some work, but they wanted to reverse that decision. And they did. There are now eggs all over the place. We also saw this in Legion with the Blue Dragonflight. We've seen Sibelian return with Black Dragon eggs. Dragons can reproduce, yet this book, it says that they can't. Now they do offer an introduction to the book, written by Archmage Khadgar, who is the one writing this bad boy.
Knowledge is power.
My intent in creating this compendium is not only to write a history of the Dragonflights, but also to explore the more intricate threads woven through many of our world's most pivotal moments. Having such privileged access to great libraries of Gul'dan, Karazhan, and now the Dragon Isles, it is allowed for gathering of knowledge unrivaled at any other time. As with any detailed account, this book should be taken with a grain of salt, or should I say, sand? Although every effort was made to consult primary sources, such weighty matters as the ordering of the cosmos, or the motivations of a titan, remain at best a theory. As life goes on, our understanding of these events will evolve. New perspectives may emerge that have the power to change everything we once knew about our beloved champions and reviled villains. As scholars, however, we must always strive to seek the truth, no matter where or however long it takes us. So it's an introduction aimed at making sure that you know that the lore in Warcraft is fluid. New insights can change what we know in the future, and in essence, that is what Warcraft lore is. It's an ongoing story with changes along the way. The information that follows is from a point of view. It is provided by Khadgar, who's done a whole bunch of research. However, that does not mean that just anything goes. That does not mean that you no longer have to check the lore, and if you are going to use point of view, then use point of view. Say that this book is written by Khadgar, right? Who has access to the Dragon Isles, who can interview the Bronze Dragonflights, and no matter where or however long it's going to take us, we must seek the truth. Then this whole book can be fact-checked by the Bronze Dragonflights. Your universe has beings that can travel the timeways, and they can check out if his information is correct. Now I know that's cheating, right? Okay, well let's pretend like we don't have the Bronze Dragonflight. There's still a certain expectation as to what Khadgar knows. From his point of view, Illidan was a powerful ally who secured victory against the Burning Legion within the Expansion Legion, in which the Archmage brought him back to Azeroth through the Light's Heart questline, a questline which was given to us by Khadgar, and it showed us that Illidan, he was in fact not in league with Sargeras. Rather, he's been spending his whole life working against Sargeras and the Burning Legion. That is knowledge that Khadgar should have. So why does this book say that was written by Khadgar? Why does the book say that Illidan was actually in league with Sargeras? Khadgar should know better. There's also a part where he makes a little side note, and he says that information presented on this page, it is passed through oral storytelling, part of Pandaren history, and so it should be treated as a primary source. In universe, from Khadgar's point of view, it's pretty weird to accuse the Pandaren of not keeping an accurate history, considering that they have a whole faction dedicated to this job.
You're really gonna disrespect Lorewalker Cho, Khadgar? Lorewalker Cho, you dare?
The history behind that is that while the Pandaren were enslaved to the Mogu, they weren't allowed to learn how to read or write. Their history, it was preserved secretly, passed on through stories again and again and again to the eventual liberated slaves. So to know the history behind why they have oral history and to then say, you know, maybe don't take it that seriously, it's interesting. But then maybe he just wants to do his due diligence, right? Make sure that we know that this is a story that's been passed on, a legend, if you will. But then I do gotta ask, why doesn't Khadgar make the same note when he's talking about a Tusker legend from the Warcraft RPG? And here, he doesn't make a note about his reliability. He takes the story behind Frostbridge as gospel when talking about a mythos of Melagos and a human who build a bridge together. He makes mention of knowing what the old gods were thinking during the War of the Ancients, which honestly, I would love to know his source on that one. And if he doesn't have a source, then why would Khadgar write it down? Right? Malfurion is apparently not the only Night Elf druids that fought in the War of the Ancients, although this part might just be them changing the lore a little bit. There are two versions as to how the aspects were empowered, which contradicts his own research. One version has them empowered in Northrend next to Galagrons's corpse. The other has them empowered within the Dragon Isles on Tyr's infusion place. A small note as I was listening back to the video. One side does say empowerment, whereas the other side say ascent, which is a bit of a more vague term. The part that gets me confused is that both articles talk about them turning from primal dragons into the Guardians of Azeroth they are today. Either they turned from primal dragons at Galagrons's corpse, or I would say they turned from primal dragons at Tyr's infusion place. And that's where I'm wondering, like, how come these two versions are so very similar? But in the kindest light, in the all the possibilities way, I would say that Ascent can have multiple interpretations. He also plays favorites, saying that Kalecgos contributed the most amongst all the dragons. Now, I know that Khadgar and Kalecgos are friends, but that is quite a statement to make. So long story short, in this book, point of view, besides some funny side scribbles from Khadgar, it's not being used in an interesting way to present the lore. It's not to open your eyes to a brand new perspective. Rather, it's to cover themselves in case they want to change lore in the future, which honestly they don't have to. Enjoying Warcraft lore is understanding that it can change. You could use point of view for anything, but it does somewhat devalue the product that you're selling, especially when you then ship it with blatant mistakes in it. Hopefully, we're going to see a second print of the book, one in which they do a better review and fix some of the mistakes. Now let's move on and actually dive into some of the more interesting bits that the book has to offer, because it does actually have some cool stuff going on. The information on the Bronze Dragonflight, and by extension the Infinites, is probably my favorite part of the whole book, so let us start there. Earlier on, it's established that the Bronze are charged to protect keystone moments in time. Key events, and once more, it speaks of the so-called true timeline. Charged by the Titans, they have to keep that safe. We now have confirmation that all bronze dragons are shown their moment of demise, so it wasn't just to keep Nosdormu in check. Chromie didn't just peek on their own to check out how they're going to die. All bronze dragons know where they're supposed to go, and they need to guide the timeline to keep that pure. In turn, aside from Nosdormu, the Infinites don't typically attempt to recruit the bronze. Instead, the dragons await their kin's eventual awakening. Now, knowing your demise and having access to that timeline, those are two different things. But Nosdormu apparently does have access again, as we read within the Tall Dresses section. From within the Sanctum of Chronology, Nosdormu is able to access the timeways, allowing him to revisit any point in time, including the very moment of his own demise. Though many mortals judge the visions of the Titan Aman'Thul as a curse, the Bronze sees such knowledge as a mere consequence of serving the one true timeline. So going from that, you would imagine that this moment of demise, the one that he has access to, that is the one that we prevented with Chromie. However, a little bit further down, we read about Moruzand. For Nosdormu, his transformation into the corrupted Moruzand has always been not a matter of if, but when. Yet, with the hour of twilight averted, the question arises whether Nosdormu's grim future has been changed, or whether the victory over Deathwing was merely an expected step along the path to the true end time. That the infinite Dragonflight continues to meddle with the flow of time and seek the aspect's corruption seems to warn the latter. As a side note, they describe the Hour of Twilight not directly as the old gods breaking out of prisons. Instead, it's more in the direction of ending all life. The sun has set on the age of mortals, leaving behind only twilight. It's a minor detail, with ultimately having the same effect, but I think this is to make more in line with the old gods being truly dead and gone now. Regardless, when it comes to Nosdormu and the Moruzand bit, I think it works best if we retcon and imagine one thing, simply imagine that this never happened.
At last it has come to pass. The moment of my demise. The loop is closed. My future self will cause no more harm.
If we can imagine that Nosdormu never confirmed this moment as his true moment of demise, that moment shown to him by Aman'Thul, then opens up the possibilities of his corruption and demise happening later down the line. That way, you could preserve the original mission and vision shown by Aman'Thul, and you can still have the story flow. Now, an alternative would be to have Aman'Thul's mission be a complete lie, and the Titans using the dragons for their own purpose. Time will tell, as they say. Now, I also love the description when it comes to the infinites. Prophets warn that to know the moments of one's death is to invite madness and despair. Given the choice, few would willingly accept such a glimpse into their future, yet such is said to be the reality for every member of the Bronze Dragonflight. As keepers of time, who navigate the pathways of the past, present and future, such knowledge is both an unavoidable reality and an inevitable fate due to the sacred Titan pledge that prohibits their interference. Yet what if the future held something truly catastrophic? A vision of death and carnage so consuming that it threatened the entirety of existence. When weighed against preserving the sanctity of all life in the universe, of what possible value is a Titan directive? Given the chance to alter such a grim future, who wouldn't be tempted to stray from the primary timeline? The correct decision seems to lie somewhere between the opposing directives of the Bronze and Infinite Dragonflights. With the power of the aspects lost and the hour of twilight averted, all we can do is hope that our defiance of the Infinite Dragonflight's vision proves to be the right choice. Honestly, I wish this was more explored in the game. Now, another part within the Tell Dresses section that became way more interesting when I started to type it out for this video, when I started to repeat it. It says, Tall Dresses, the gathering place of the 5 ancient flights and location of the revered site of Tyrhold. It is within this sacred monument that the Halls of Infusion reside, a set of complex machinery that draws its immense power from the wellspring of eternity. In the time before the Great Sundering shattered the continent of Kalimdor, this grand device allowed the aspects and their flights to ascend from mere primal dragons into the guardians of Azeroth they are today. Now, I completely read over this and I was like, yeah, cool, empowerment of the aspects, but this is actually huge. The wellspring of eternity, I imagine that means the Well of Eternity, right? That magical fount of power which transformed the Dark Trolls into the Night Elves. I'd imagine that is what they mean, but whatever, a wellspring of eternity. Within the Halls of Infusion, a set of complex machinery, a grand device allowed the aspects to ascend from mere primal dragons into the guardians of Azeroth they are today. So the timeline is that Galagrand drinks this corrupted water and becomes a threat. The future aspects unite with Tyr and take him out. In turn, they call upon the Titans and they empower the aspects. But now, with the addition of the Halls of Infusion and these waters from the Well of Eternity, waters connected to Azeroth itself. Now, I couldn't pinpoint exactly when Tyr built Tyrhold, but his report, Uldoros, it gives the idea that Galagrand's been taken care of. So, if they use the waters from the Well of Eternity to then empower the aspects and the dragons to begin with, then their re-empowerment through Azeroth itself it makes a whole lot more sense. This could also be the reason why Alexstrasza wanted to reactivate those Oath Stones at the beginning of Dragonflight. Reactivate those same machineries that empowered them in the first place, and perhaps due to the Sundering, or a more philosophical reason, you can insert whatever reason you want here, that mission failed, and so their empowerment had to come from elsewhere. For the moment, as I was writing this and discussing it on Discord, I got really excited. But unfortunately, the book itself contradicts this information, as earlier on it says, gathering on the icy tundra near where Gul'dan fell, keepers Freya, Loken, Ra and Arcadus acted as conduits and channeled the Pantheon's power to transform Alexstrasza, Malygos, Nosdormu and Neltharion into the aspects of the red, green, blue, bronze and black Dragonflights respectively. In their new roles, each vowed to safeguard one of the primary forces of Azeroth: life, nature, magic, time and earth. To further aid in their monumental task, the Keepers imbued hundreds of primal dragons with the same grace and power of the aspects, thus creating the 5 Dragonflights of Azeroth. Perhaps this is once again a case of new lore versus old lore, because Dawn of the Aspects, an older book, it also has their empowerment take place near the corpse of Gul'dan. The icy tundra bits, it definitely makes it seem like they were empowered in what we now call Dragonblight, whereas the Halls of Infusion seems to be a new version. Again, I really like the new version, the addition of the Halls of Infusion, and I would honestly prefer that variation, but then I'm just confused why there are 2 separate versions in one book, in one study written down by Khadgar. So I don't know, maybe there was a different story direction once upon a time. I have no idea. This book is quite a trip when it comes to lore accuracy. Anyways, let's move on. It does once again confirm that primal dragons only exist due to the actions of the Titans, their war against the Black Empire, the imprisonment of the Elemental Lords, which, considering that this is now general knowledge, right, it leaves the question why Iridikron is signing up with the Void. Not wanting to be forced on the path of the Titans is fantastic, but not existing or enslavement to the Void, it's also not a fantastic option. And hopefully this is something to come back to later. Then the skull of Tirnistras is on display within the Ironforge Museum, right? You might have seen it in-game. While the bones of dragons, they should go to Dragonblight, or with the Isles open, back to the Dragon Isles. Despite several requests by Khadgar to have his skull transported and laid to rest within Northrend, it continues to be on display. Then about the greens, there's a part that had me curious. So they speak about the dragons of Nightmare, and when possible, upon cleansing their spirits, the dragons ended up back in their domain within the Emerald Dream. Yet for Ysera, she ended up in the Shadowlands, Ardenweald specifically. Sephiron's essence is also mentioned and been released into the Shadowlands after we shatter Frostmourne, so it does seem like dragons belong in the same afterlife as the mortals. I'm just kinda curious why some seemingly directly went to the Dream, while others went into the Shadowlands, and when going to the Shadowlands, what domain might they have ended up in? Then there are some cool details on the evolution of the X, Youngs, Draconids, Elemental Dragons, and their speculated origins like the Stone Dragons. A nice note, I thought it was nice anyways, is regarding the growth of the Emerald Nightmare, the infestation of the Dream, and how it could grow so big. So, not only did people not really talk about having these nightmares, it was also a bit of a stigma amongst the Druids that such chaos of the mind, it was the antithesis of their long training and a weakness to be overcome through increased meditation. Exactly the opposite of what they were supposed to be doing, which I thought was kinda clever, and the reason why Ysandra fell back into the clutch of the Nightmare, that is because she tried to help stop the corruption of Shaladrisil, which, if you're familiar with her story and her fear of being retaken by the Nightmare, it can't have been an easy choice to make, and yet she still tried. The book does have more. It has nearly everything gathered on dragons, like the Plague Dragons. I freaking love that chapter so much. Now, at the start, we were talking about the negative side of point of view and how it's not a blank check for just making mistakes. But some of these little notes and comparisons from Khadgar are kind of funny. He mentions, since Daladan's departure from the shores of Lordamer Lake, reagents for slow fall spells have become quite dear to any resident lacking wings and scales. Or, many who accompanied the King of Stormwind in his hunt for Onyxia were slain not by the Broodmother, but by the dozens of young whelplings defending her lair.
Whelps! Left side!
And that's where we'll wrap up the video for today. So thank you very much for watching, everyone. This codex, right into the script, and comparing the lore that came before to how they presented here, it's definitely being trip. Seeing a book contradict its own information, Yeah, what can you say? Say that you do want to pick up the codex for your collection, then check out the link in the description down below. Subscribe if you like it here, ring the bell, leave a comment, a like, a dislike, do all the things that we do while living on the internet. And until next time, see ya!